Alrighty, so let's move on to why we're actually here. I do appreciate the background, and it's good to get insight into yourself.
Thank you. We can forget about all that now.
Horology, watch collecting. Is it horology, right?
Horology.
Yeah.
So how did you guys get into it? Because obviously there is a passion there for you guys. You're both younger men, so I'm sure that the budget is going to expand as the finances expand, but you guys definitely have a passion there. Firstly, Philip, how did you get into it? Was there any one or two moments where you're like, I need to start collecting watches? Like, take us on your journey.
Yeah, there definitely was. And interestingly, before the moment, you always had like one or two watches. It was kind of like the fashion watches, like a Fossil or, something like that.
Armani watch.
Something like that, yeah. But my moment, I remember, was during COVID. And I don't know if it was a combination of kind of being cooped up. I was working at the time, so I did have a little bit of money. And then I was kind of like, what do I start buying? You just start shopping, and then watches started coming up. And then I remember just like doing a deep dive into, you Google best first watch and best automatic under $100.
Yep.
So like
Not
I'm
available.
going to start somewhere, man.
yeah, you start Googling all that, and then my first one was this Seiko. If I remember the thing, I think it's a SNK 801 or something like that. But it's like a field watch. It's just like a 37 millimeter. It looks kind of like a Hamilton khaki type thing. And yeah, that was like my first watch that I felt like this was going to be my gateway into it. And I remember that watch comes with like a little bit of the dial is like it was like a sandblasted type of dial, so it was very matte looking. And I went to the auto store and got like this metal polisher, and I like polished the bezel of it, so it became like a shiny thing. So it's funny when you see it online, it looks very different to like what I've made it.
That's cool.
And that was like my first intro into watches, and then from then on, yeah, we'll get onto the other ones, but yeah.
So you actually did a bit of research to buy your first watch.
Yeah, in terms of like what's a good watch to get into,
Yeah.
and then obviously Seiko pops up as that first, like one of the brands that you can get into, and probably is one of the main brands that people will start their watch collection with.
Yeah.
And you can go any direction with Seiko, like divers or whatever, and a huge price range from like $100 to a grand Seiko, which is tens of thousands. But yeah, I did a little bit of research, even if it was for $100 watch.
Well, you got me covered. I think I walked past Wallace Bishop or something, and I was like, hey, Mum, can I get this Armani watch? or something like that, you know what I mean? That was me, so you actually put a bit of thought into it.
Yeah.
Before we get Raga's story, did you grow up around watches? Did you see other, older men have watches that you liked? Because I didn't.
Not at all. Yeah, not at all. My dad would always have his one watch, and he's not like a watch person, but he would just have one watch and keep it for years and years and years.
Yep.
And that's one thing that I always remembered about him and his watches. And interestingly though, now when I look back at his few watches that he has, they're like these really awesome Seikos that like obviously I didn't care about in the past, but now with an appreciation for watches, I'm like, that's a really cool Seiko. Like I would totally wear that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, didn't grow up around watches at all, so I never really had any experience with it. Obviously, you hear about Rolex and stuff, and you're like, oh, that's cool, but you never had the drive to get one, whereas that's completely different now.
It's funny as well, like you say, coming out of COVID, everyone's got this extra time, you're cooped up. It definitely correlated to a massive explosion in interest.
Yeah, exactly. New hobbies.
I think
and all that stuff.
Professionals definitely attest to that. So
yeah, right.
Raga, the first question then was, did you grow up around watches? Did any of your uncles or grandparents have something that you saw that tickled your fancy?
It's really interesting that you asked me this question because growing up, I just strongly remember both my granddads on either side. They always used to have a watch on their hands. Like I've never seen them without a watch. Especially my dad's dad. Like if if he doesn't have he will never leave the house without his watch. And it wasn't always about like the big brands or anything like that, but it was just like, if you're going somewhere, you put on a nice shirt and you put your watch on before you head out. And so that was always a memory in my head. My grandparents, always, my granddads on either side, they always used to have their watch. And I actually have one from each side that I took with me in their memory to make, so like it was very, definitely like it was a big influence growing up for me.
Yeah. No, that's so cool, man, because I would have loved to have that where I saw something and that kind of made me aspire to it, but I can't
Yeah.
say that's the case. And then how did you start taking it a bit more seriously?
Yeah, so for me, initially it was, growing up when you're young, you don't really understand the difference between like a fashion watch versus an actual watchmaker who's been making watches for a few hundred years. So I have to admit, initially, I think it must have been like a fashion accessory for me. Also just to, complete a look or something. You're wearing a shirt, you have a watch on, and it just sort of, it was nice to have something on my wrist. And then as I sort of grew older and older, it was more like, it's a lot more meaningful than that. A watch represents a moment in time or a memory. So you might have bought that watch to commemorate a particular event or commemorate a particular achievement. And then, so that sort of opened up a whole new world for me. And similarly, my first ever proper watch was also during COVID. Naran might remember this, but it was a Seiko 5 that I bought. It had a wine glass, it had a wine red dial, and it was a diver with a sort of a stainless steel mesh, which I've recently swapped out for a two-tone gold bracelet. But
Nice.
but basically that was like my first watch that was a proper watch brand prior to all, because these guys, Naran and a couple of my other friends bought me a Fossil for my 18th birthday.
Oh, nice.
And I still have that watch, and I didn't bring it with me today, but I'll show it to you another time, but I still have that. But that was sort of, so the Seiko sort of, and you look at the dial, you look at the craftsmanship, and it was an automatic, and I was just fascinated by how, like, there's a mechanical component to this. This is a machine with intricate sort of workings that, and the dial was beautiful. It was shined different in different lighting, and it sort of just opened up my world into watch collecting. Yeah.
And his favorite color is red, so
Yeah.
I was going to say I can tell, but I can tell now.
Yeah.
So let's say, our friends who look at it and say, well, guys, you can keep better time on your phone, which is correct. They don't understand all those things, and I like the passion that you were talking about then. I like to liken it to, you can look at a great photograph, but the difference is actually looking at a great painting. You're like, there's details here, there's different things, there's a story, there's the effort that it took to create something like that. It's just not comparable.
yeah, exactly.
100%.
So, if you guys have
That's a great
anything on that to
yeah.
tell those who would rather keep time on a iPhone.
Get a watch.
Yeah.
It's time to get a watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like as well, like you said, it's different things. You've got one to commemorate your 18th.
Yeah.
I'm sure we spoke about it before, Philip, potentially a year or two when certain accomplishments get ticked off, you hoping to have something lined up for that.
Yeah.
No reason why you can't get one when you get engaged.
Yeah.
I forced my wife to get myself something.
Yeah.
So, we're buying a ring, we may as well get something in return, right?
Yeah.
I feel like it's pretty much like anything that you have a passion for.
Correct. Yeah.
People have a passion for sneakers or cars or jewelry. Like, what's the difference between this super cool silver ring versus, something that's like stainless steel that looks the same, but you go for this other one because it's got meaning to you. So, like,
Correct.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. If
100%. And I also want to say, like, it's not about the price point for me anyway. Like, I'm not a snob. Like, I don't particularly look at quartz versus automatic, or I'm not a horologist in the truest sense. For me, It could be any price, but as long as it sort of represents a particular point in time in your life to you that's significant. Like I could point at every single one of my watches and I'll tell you where I got it from, why I got it, and what event it might be commemorating. Naran might have some thoughts on my watch buying tendencies, but generally speaking, I do like to commemorate nice big events with a watch.
Yeah.
Yeah.